You ever get fired in the most humiliating way possible? Picture this. I was called into the conference room at 9 a.m. sharp, blindsided and tossed out like yesterday's trash. No warning. No explanation. Just a security escort back to my desk. But here's the part they never saw coming. By 2 p.m. that same day, I had frozen their secret $46 million slush fund, and every executive in that office knew their careers were about to go up in flames. My name is Emily Carter, and this is the story of how my wrongful termination turned into the most satisfying revenge of my life. I'd worked at Silverwood Global Consulting for almost 9 years. To most people, it was a dream job. Shiny offices in downtown Chicago, glass walls that overlooked the skyline, catered lunches, the whole deal. But behind the polished image, the company had rot at its core. Executives used it as their personal playground, lavish trips, offshore accounts, shady expense reports. And me? I was just the quiet, diligent finance manager who kept the books balanced and the auditors satisfied. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the type to play office politics. But I had access. Every transaction, every hidden account, every dollar that passed through the company eventually passed through my desk. When you sit in that chair long enough, you start to see the truth. And trust me, once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. But before everything exploded, before I was fired in the coldest way possible, let me take you back. Because the seeds of this revenge story started months before that fateful morning. I wasn't some cold numbers person. I was human. I had a daughter, Sophie, who was 10 at the time, and every late night I spent reconciling accounts was for her future. I lived in a modest townhouse outside the city, drove a beat-up Toyota, and my biggest splurge was Friday night pizza and Netflix. At work, though, I was the fixer. If money went missing, I found it. If numbers didn't add up, I made them add up. People knew me as reliable, almost invisible, which was exactly why the execs thought they could push me around. But invisible doesn't mean powerless. It started small. A weird charge here, a consulting fee there. But then came the offshore transfers. Payments routed through shell companies in Luxembourg, Cayman Islands, Singapore. When I first saw the wire details, I thought it was a mistake. But the amounts were staggering, millions at a time, and always to accounts with vague, generic names like Sunrise Holdings or Global Path Ventures. I flagged it to my boss, David, the CFO. He brushed me off with a smirk. "Emily, don't worry about those. High-level strategy stuff. Above your pay grade." I remember the way he said it, like I was a child asking about grown-up business. That was the first time I felt that knot in my stomach, the one that told me, something here isn't just shady, it's criminal. Over the next few months, I couldn't ignore it. I started keeping copies of everything: emails, wire transfers, scanned receipts. I told myself it was just to protect my job. But deep down, I knew I was building a case. And here's the irony. They fired me for being too careful. That morning, 9 a.m. on the dot, HR called me in. The head of HR, a woman named Caroline, wouldn't even look me in the eye. She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Emily, we're restructuring. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks of severance." 2 weeks. After 9 years. I sat there stunned. "Restructuring?" I asked. "But you just hired 3 new analysts last month. What's really going on?" Caroline shifted uncomfortably but repeated the same line like a robot. "Your position is being eliminated." That's when it clicked. They weren't firing me because of restructuring. They were firing me because I'd seen too much. As security walked me back to my desk to collect my things, I kept my face calm. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Because what they didn't know, what none of them realized, was that I already had the keys to their kingdom. And by 2 p.m. that day, I would use those keys to lock their empire down. When I left that glass-walled conference room at 9:30 a.m., escorted like a criminal, I wasn't just angry. I was insulted. 9 years of loyalty, erased in a 30-second script read by HR. The security guard, Mike, who I'd shared a coffee with 100 times, wouldn't even look me in the eyes as he walked me to my cubicle. People stared. Some whispered. And there I was, slipping my family photo, my coffee mug, my pins into a cardboard box like it was the end of a TV show season. But what no one knew was that inside my head, I was already plotting my next move. See, when you work in finance at a multinational, you don't just see numbers. You control numbers. Every transfer, every account authorization, every backdoor that lets money flow? Someone like me has to log it, validate it, and quietly move it along. And here's the kicker. Months ago, when I started noticing those irregular offshore transfers, I'd built what I call a mirror archive. Every shady transaction was duplicated into my own secure folder. And not just the data, I had access codes, digital keys, and system passwords. They thought I was invisible. They thought I was harmless. But they had given me the equivalent of the master switch. Now let me explain why 2 p.m. became my magic hour. When you're terminated, IT usually takes a couple of hours to fully cut off your access. They lock your email first, then your badge. But back-end systems? Financial portals? Those take longer. And because of the sheer complexity of Silverwood's infrastructure, I knew I had a small window of time before my digital fingerprints vanished from their system. So while I sat there packing my box, I was also logging in from my phone hotspot, accessing the financial servers through a backdoor I'd quietly kept for months. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of knowing what I was about to do. Let's talk about that $46 million slush fund. Most companies have discretionary accounts, money earmarked for investments, partnerships, or emergency spending. But this wasn't above board. This was the executive's personal playground. Trips to Monaco disguised as client meetings. A yacht rental in Greece filed as a team-building retreat. Jewelry purchases coded as corporate gifts. And the worst part? Tax evasion. They'd been funneling money into offshore accounts to avoid U.S. regulations. I had every receipt, every transfer, every fake invoice. And now I had something better. The ability to freeze it all. At 1:45 p.m., I sat in my car in the parking garage, pretending to scroll my phone while security hovered nearby. My box of belongings sat on the passenger seat. My heart raced so hard I could hear it in my ears. I logged in. Access granted. Their negligence was my weapon. I navigated through layers of menus until I reached the fund control dashboard. One more step and I'd lock down every offshore account connected to Silverwood's shell companies. No withdrawals. No transfers. No access unless I approved it. My finger hovered over the mousepad. And in that moment I thought of Sophie. I thought of how I'd tell her that Mommy got fired today. And then I thought, no. Mommy didn't just get fired. Mommy fought back. Click. By 2:03 p.m., every dollar in that $46 million slush fund was frozen. Permanently. The first alert must have hit David's phone within minutes. Because while I was pulling out of the garage, I saw him through the glass lobby, storming out of his office, phone pressed to his ear, red-faced and panicked. I smiled for the first time that day. That night, while most people in the office probably tossed and turned, I slept like a baby. Because I knew tomorrow morning chaos would erupt. And chaos was exactly what they deserved. At 8:15 the next morning my phone buzzed. Not with an apology. Not with severance. But with panicked calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. By 9 a.m., news broke inside the company. Every account tied to executive spending was locked. No one could move a dime. Vendors weren't getting paid. Partners were calling in. And whispers started circulating that someone had sabotaged the system. Of course, David and the CEO, Mr. Thompson, knew exactly who had the power to do this. And that's when my real leverage began. It's one thing to freeze money. It's another to hold proof of corruption. In my mirror archive sat a tidy little package, transaction logs, email chains, wire instructions, and expense reports. Enough to bury half the executive team under federal investigation. And I didn't just keep it for myself. That morning, while sipping coffee at my kitchen table in sweatpants, I drafted an email. Attached was a 30-page PDF titled, Silverwood Slush Fund Summary Evidence of Fraudulent Transactions. I sent it to 3 places simultaneously. The board of directors, a trusted journalist I'd met years ago, and just for good measure, the IRS whistleblower office. By noon, the company's phones must have been ringing like fire alarms. But here's the thing. Revenge isn't just about striking back. It's about watching the dominoes fall. And trust me, when those dominoes started crashing down, they didn't just take my old bosses with them. They shook the entire empire of Silverwood to its core. And the most satisfying part? I was sitting at home, popcorn in hand, watching it unfold. The morning after I sent out that evidence package, I woke up to more notifications than I'd ever seen on my phone. Missed calls, voicemails, emails from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Silverwood was on fire, and I had lit the match. I padded into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window as the sun came up. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't felt at work. Peace. By 10 a.m., Silverwood's board of directors had convened an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, obviously, but a friend inside the company gave me the play-by-play later. David, the CFO, was practically sweating through his shirt. The CEO, Mr. Thompson, barked orders like a general losing a war. The board members, those polished, untouchable men and women, sat stone-faced as they flipped through the documents I had sent. Page after page of fraud. Wire transfers with Thompson's signature. Emails where David greenlit creative accounting. Expense reports that looked more like celebrity shopping sprees. And every time one of them tried to brush it off, another director slammed the evidence down. One phrase echoed through the room. If the IRS has this, we're finished. By noon, my old office looked like a crime scene. IT was tearing through servers trying to trace the freeze. Lawyers stormed in and out with folders. Phones rang non-stop. People whispered in hallways wondering how deep the rot went. And the executives? They started turning on each other faster than wolves fighting over scraps. David accused Thompson. Thompson blamed Caroline from HR. Caroline blamed the legal department. Everyone was desperate to shift blame, while I sat at home watching daytime TV and eating leftover pizza. At 2:30 p.m., my journalist contact published the first article. Insider leak reveals Silverwood's $46 million offshore slush fund. Within an hour, the story spread across financial news outlets. CNBC, Bloomberg, even Reddit had a thread dissecting the scandal. People were furious. Silverwood wasn't just any consulting firm. It handled contracts for government agencies, pension funds, and healthcare organizations. This wasn't just fraud. It was betrayal of public trust. And because I'd sent the documents anonymously, the media called me the Ghost Accountant. I laughed so hard when I saw that nickname. Ghost? I liked the sound of that. Around 5 p.m. that day, my phone rang again. This time I recognized the number. It was David. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was frantic, almost breaking. Emily, listen. I know you're upset, but you don't understand what you've done. You've put the entire company at risk. Just call me back, please. We can work something out. Work something out? After firing me like trash? After robbing employees blind with their slush fund? No, David. That ship had sailed. By the end of the week, the IRS and SEC were officially investigating. Federal agents had walked into Silverwood's headquarters with boxes and laptops. Employees whispered as suits carried documents out by the armload. Rumors swirled. Bank accounts frozen, executive bonuses clawed back, even potential indictments. Meanwhile, I took Sophie to the park. She swung on the swings, laughing, while I sat on the bench scrolling through the latest headlines about the Silverwood scandal. Parents around me chatted about school schedules and weekend plans, completely unaware that the woman sitting next to them was the reason a $46 million empire was collapsing in real time. People always ask, weren't you scared? And I'll be honest, yes, a part of me was. I knew these men had power, money, connections. I knew they could make life difficult for me if they figured out I was the whistleblower. But the fear never outweighed the satisfaction. Watching arrogant men who thought they were untouchable squirm under the weight of their own greed? It was like justice served hot. And I wasn't just doing it for me. I was doing it for every single person who'd ever been chewed up and spit out by a company that didn't care. Within a month, the CEO, Thompson, resigned under pressure. David, the CFO, was fired and later charged with financial misconduct. Caroline from HR? She vanished, but rumor has it she cut a deal to testify. Silverwood's stock price dropped 38% in 2 weeks. Clients pulled contracts. Partners walked away. And inside the company, employees finally started speaking up about years of toxic culture. Silverwood Global Consulting, the empire that once bragged about its billions, was now a punchline on late-night TV. One evening, about 6 weeks after my firing, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine. The air was cool, cicadas buzzing in the background. Sophie was inside doing homework. I opened my laptop and pulled up the financial news again. Another headline about Silverwood's massive collapse. And for the first time I whispered out loud. I did that. Not out of arrogance. Not out of spite. But as a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones, the ones you think you can discard without consequence, are the ones who hold all the power. But here's the thing about revenge stories. They're never just about revenge. They're about what you learn in the ashes that remain. And as much as I enjoyed watching Silverwood burn, the real ending of this story wasn't about them. It was about what came next, for me, for Sophie, and for anyone who's ever been wrongfully terminated. A few months after the Silverwood scandal exploded, life settled into a strange new rhythm. I was no longer Emily Carter, finance manager at a global firm. I was just Emily, the mom who made pancakes on Saturday mornings, who walked her daughter to school, who planted flowers in the front yard. But I carried with me a kind of peace I'd never felt before. For years I'd swallowed my frustrations, kept my head down, told myself that hard work would eventually be rewarded. Instead, it had nearly buried me under someone else's corruption. When they fired me, they thought they'd silenced me. Instead, they set me free. Here's the truth. Companies love to say we're family. But families don't throw you out at 9 a.m. without warning. Families don't steal millions and expect you to cover it up. What I learned is this. Loyalty should go both ways. If it doesn't, it's not loyalty, it's exploitation. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet person with the spreadsheets who has the real leverage. And most importantly, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about balance. It's about reminding people that actions have consequences, no matter how powerful they think they are. One morning I was dropping Sophie off at school. She kissed my cheek and ran inside, her backpack bouncing. Another parent, someone I barely knew, walked up and said, "Hey, aren't you the ghost accountant?" I froze, then laughed. "Maybe," I said. For the first time I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person who'd ever been humiliated, underestimated, or discarded. People needed to hear it, not for the scandal, but for the reminder that we're not powerless. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been wrongfully terminated, betrayed, or treated like you didn't matter, remember, your story isn't over. Sometimes the ending they try to write for you is just the beginning of a better chapter. Silverwood lost $46 million, their empire, and their reputations. And me? I gained freedom, dignity, and the kind of story you only get once in a lifetime. Now I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever been wrongfully terminated or seen someone get treated unfairly at work? Backhand index pointing right. What would your revenge look like if you had the power? Drop your stories in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And who knows? Maybe your story deserves to be told next. This was my story. Fired at 9 a.m. By 2 p.m., I froze their $46 million slush fund. Sometimes karma doesn't wait years. Sometimes it only needs 5 hours.